The cold crept in before the sun had fully disappeared, wrapping the streets of Skid Row in a damp, unforgiving chill. It was the kind of cold that wasn't loud, didn't scream, but settled into the bones like it had always lived there. Among the tattered tents and rusting shopping carts, nestled between dumpsters and back alley fences, a makeshift shelter of patched tarps and pallet wood shivered with the wind. Inside it, a boy held his breath. Elijah had grown used to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind where even the rats stopped scratching and the wind dared not whisper. The kind that meant something was wrong. His sister Maya lay curled on a thin foam mattress covered in a faded beach towel. Her lips were cracked, her forehead beaded with sweat. For 3 days now, the fever had held her hostage, and nothing Elijah did seem to help. He had used every trick the streets had taught him: sugar water, cold compresses made from damp shirts, crushed aspirin from a half-empty bottle someone had tossed behind the pharmacy. Nothing worked. "Maya," he whispered, brushing a strand of matted hair from her face. "You wheeze me." She stirred faintly, murmured something that sounded like mama, and then slipped back into the haze. Elijah leaned back, pressing his palms into his eyes. His hands were shaking. He was 12, though he rarely admitted it out loud. Out here, numbers didn't buy you mercy. They had been alone for 2 years. Their mother, warm, chaotic, radiant, had overdosed on fentanyl behind a Dollar Tree in East Compton. Their father had disappeared before Maya could walk. Child Protective Services had come once, briefly. Elijah had lied, said their aunt lived nearby. She didn't. No one did. Tonight, Maya's breathing was too shallow. Erskine tout haute. Elijah made a decision. He was going to take her to the hospital. The County General Hospital in downtown Los Angeles loomed like a spaceship, its sterile lights glowing through the night haze. Elijah had seen it before, when an old man in the encampment had sliced open his leg and bled all over the curb. The paramedics had come, wrapped him like luggage, and vanished into those doors. He hadn't come back. Now Elijah stood at the edge of the emergency entrance, Maya bundled against his chest with 2 layers of old hoodies and a threadbare blanket. His feet were numb. His breath came out in mist. Inside, the warmth of the hospital was almost offensive. It smelled of antiseptic and machine oil. Nurses in scrubs buzzed between patients, monitors beeped from curtained bays, and everything moved like a language he didn't speak. He approached the front desk. A woman glanced up, then down again. "I need help," Elijah said. "My sister is sick. Real bad." "Do you have a guardian with you?" she asked without looking up. "No. It's just us." "Do you have ID? Medical insurance?" "Social." He shook his head. The woman sighed. "I'm sorry, kid. Without a legal guardian, we can't admit her. You need to contact CPS or bring a parent." "She's dying," Elijah said. "You don't understand. She's burning up." A security guard approached. "Son, you can't be here without an adult." "I'm not leaving." Elijah barked. "She needs help, please." More security. A hand on his shoulder. He backed away, heart pounding. Then he ran. Through the waiting area, past the vending machines, down a side hole that smelled like bleach and plastic. Maya moaned against his chest. He ducked into a narrow corridor where a cart full of medical supplies sat unattended. His mind moved faster than his fear. He reached out. 1 bottle. Then another. Syringe. A small bottle of children's acetaminophen. An oral syringe. Gauze. Anything that looked like it might help. Then a voice. "Hey, what are you doing?" Elijah spun and ran, gripping Maya tighter. Alarms didn't go off, but footsteps did. Heavy ones. He slipped through a side door, emerged into an alley drenched in shadows. His heart was beating so loud it hurt. The cold slapped him again, a reminder of the real world. He kept running until he reached the edge of the parking structure. That's when he saw the black SUV. It was late, past midnight, but the vehicle pulled into a loading zone near the dumpsters. A man in a suit stepped out, glancing over his shoulder. He carried a large black trash bag. "It skished strangely." He opened the dumpster lid, hesitated, then tossed the bag inside. Elia froze. The man got back into the SUV and drove off. Elijah didn't know what made him move. Maybe it was instinct, or something deeper, primal. He approached the dumpster and opened the lid. The bag had landed crookedly on top of a cardboard box. It moved. He swallowed, reached in, and tore it open. Inside was a baby. Not a doll. Not a toy. A real, crying, newborn infant, wrapped in designer blankets still bearing the gold insignia of Harper International, the famous luxury clothing brand. Elijah's body went cold. This baby couldn't be more than a day old. "Jesus," he whispered. The baby screamed, tiny and fierce. Maya stirred again in his arms. "What?" she mumbled. Elijah didn't answer. He reached down, lifted the baby into the crook of his arm, and held it tight against his chest. He was now responsible for 3 lives. Back in the tent, Elijah fed Maya a small dose of the medicine and tucked her in with every scrap of cloth he had. He created a makeshift crib for the baby using a laundry basket and soft shirts. The baby cried for a while, then fell asleep, chest rising and falling like waves on a still lake. Elijah sat between them. He was 12. He was tired. And he was terrified. But as he looked from Maya's sleeping face to the baby's tiny fists, a voice inside him said something new. "You are all they have." The streets were still cold. But in that tent, for the first time in a long time, something else stirred. A flicker. A beginning. The first light. Morning on Skid Row was different from other places. There were no birdsong, no neighbor's lawnmower, no school bells in the distance. Just the shuffle of feet over broken asphalt, the sound of cans being rattled in shopping carts, and the occasional police siren sweeping by without stopping. Elijah sat cross-legged outside the tent, a cracked thermos of hot water warming his hands. Inside, Maya slept more peacefully than she had in days. The fever had dropped slightly after the medicine, though she still mumbled in her sleep. The baby, who he'd wrapped in his only clean shirt, slept in the laundry basket with a soft, rhythmic breath. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, the hospital security guard's voice echoed in his mind, followed by the image of that man in the SUV tossing the trash bag like it was nothing. He remembered the emblem on the baby's blanket, a gold-stitched crest with an H and a crown. Harper International. Elijah had seen it on billboards, in bus ads, worn by influencers. Sienna Harper, CEO, fashion mogul, one of the wealthiest women in America. He had her baby. And someone wanted that baby gone. Elijah didn't know why. He didn't understand the politics of money or legacy or power. All he knew was that a child had been thrown away like garbage. Just like him. Just like Maya. That truth alone made his decision simple. He would return the baby to his mother. Not to the police. Not to the hospital. Not to the system. To her. Later that day, Elijah borrowed an old flip phone from a man 2 tents over, Darnell, a former cab driver who now lived on disability and carried a radio tuned to gospel music. Darnell gave him 5 minutes and warned him not to mess around. Elijah didn't. He used the phone's slow internet to search for Sienna Harper plus baby. The news was everywhere. The story had broken just 2 nights ago. Sienna Harper's newborn son, Noah Harper Emerson, had gone missing from Cedars-Sinai Hospital under suspicious circumstances. No sign of a break-in, no security for otage missing. Sienna had offered a $1 million reward for information leading to the return of her son. She looked like she'd been crying for 100 years, Darnell said, peering over his shoulder at the screen. A woman like that? Criant? That is grief Monique and fix. Elijah didn't care about the reward. He only knew one thing. This woman needed to see her baby. And maybe, just maybe, she'd believe him. Maybe she'd listen. He planned for that night. The Harper International at Carter was nothing like Skid Row. Located in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, the building towered over the city in sleek glass and steel. Every line was perfect, polished, cold. Elijah stood across the street, hoodie pulled low over his forehead. He had washed himself with bottled water behind a gas station and wrapped both babies tightly, Maya in his jacket, Noah in layers of fabric he'd stitched together with dental floss and safety pins. It was late. A press conference was wrapping up in the lobby, visible through the massive glass walls. Journalists snapped photos. A woman in a black coat with long auburn hair stood at a podium. Sienna Harper. Her eyes were tired. Her voice, through the outdoor speakers, trembled slightly. My son is out there. I know it. And to whoever has him, please, just bring him home.
No question.
Elijah watched her.
Not like a celebrity. Like a mother.
He took a breath and stepped forward. Security stopped him at the glass doors. I need to speak to her, he said, voice shaking. You and about 50 others, kid, the guard replied. Step back. I have her baby. The guard blinked. What did you say?
Elia pulet daun the blanket slitly.
Noah stirred and whimpered. That was all it took. Inside the lobby, the reaction was immediate. Reporters turned, cameras flashed, and someone whispered urgently into a mic. Sienna turned. Her eyes fell on the bundle in Elijah's arms. She moved as if pulled by invisible strings, crossing the lobby in seconds. Elijah didn't flinch. He unwrapped the blanket slowly, revealing the baby's face. Noah, she gasped. Tears fell silently. Her arms reached out, hesitant at first.
Elia let her take the child.
Noah blinked, looked up, and let out a soft coo.
The sound broke something open.
She collapsed to her knees on the marble floor, clutching her son. People swarmed around them, cameras, guards, assistants, but she raised one hand. Back. Give him space. Her eyes rose to Elijah.
What is your name?
Elia. Where did you find him?
Hesitated.
In a dumpster.
Behind the hospital.
Someone tried to get rid of him. Her face crumpled. Who?
I don't know, Elid.
He wasn't ready to say. Not yet. He didn't even know who to trust. She reached for him, not to grab, but to connect. You saved his life. He nodded, unsure what to say.
A voice broke the moment.
Is that the kid from Skid Row? A reporter yelled.
Where's the reward?
Did he kidnap the baby first? Questions exploded like gunfire.
Sienna stood.
Her voice was steel. No further comments tonight. This boy is under my protection. Full stop. She turned to Elijah.
Come with me.
That night, Elijah and Maya slept in a bedroom bigger than any tent they'd ever seen.
Clean sheet, warm air, soft light.
Maya giggled at the ceiling fan. Elijah watched her laugh and felt something shift.
Sienna knocked gently on the door.
Can I come in? Elijah nodded. She sat across from him, still holding Noah. You could have sold this story to anyone.
You could run.
Why didn't you? Because he deserves to be seen, not sold. She studied him.
What do you want?
He looked at Maya. I just want her to be safe. She reached out. Then stay. Let me help. Elijah didn't say yes. But he didn't say no. That was enough, for now. The morning light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows was nothing like the harsh glare of the sun on tarp. It was soft, golden, almost surreal. Elijah stood at the edge of the balcony attached to the guest room, watching the city stretch and yawn beneath him. It looked cleaner from here, almost peaceful. But he knew better. Inside, Maya was still asleep, tucked into the blankets like a cocoon, her fever finally broken. On the other side of the penthouse, Sienna Harper paced with her infant son in her arms, murmuring to him, soothing him with songs Elijah had only ever heard in lullabies. He still couldn't believe she had invited him and Maya to stay. No contracts.
No question.
Just space. Warmth. A kind of safety he didn't know how to trust. A knock on the door made him tense. It was Sienna's assistant, Clara, a sharp-eyed woman who never smiled too wide but always addressed him with respect. Ms. Harper would like to see you in the study. Elijah nodded, wiping his hands on his jeans. He felt out of place here, in this world of marble and glass and espresso machines, like an animal let loose in a museum. But he followed. The study was a cathedral of leather and oak. Books lined the walls in neat rows, and in the center of it all sat Sienna in an armchair, Noah resting quietly against her shoulder. She gestured for Elijah to sit. He lowered himself into the chair opposite her. I owe you a lot more than thank you, she said quietly. Elijah shook his head.
You don't owe me anything.
I do, she replied.
You gave me back my son. That is not nothing.
They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that stretches but doesn't snap. I've had people looking into the incident, she continued. Security footage, staff logs, visitor lists. It doesn't add up.
No one saw anything.
No one reported anything strange. But someone took him. And someone tried to make sure he never came back. Elijah looked down at his hands. He could still feel the weight of Noah, the softness of the blanket, the stifling panic in that hospital corridor. I saw the guy, he said finally. Sienna's eyes sharpened. Who? I don't know his name, Elijah lied again. Just, he had a suit.
Clean shoes.
Expensive car. He looked like someone who'd never been hungry. Her jaw clenched. That narrows it down to about 10 million people in this city. He almost laughed, but didn't. Sienna stood and moved toward the bookshelf. She took out a small photo frame, handed it to Elijah. It was a family photo, her, holding baby Noah, next to a tall man in a gray suit. That's Thomas, she said.
My half brother.
He was supposed to take over Harper International with me. He's been off lately. Angry.
Impatient.
Elijah stared at the man in the photo. It was him.
The same man from the alley. The man who threw Noah away.
Elijah's hands tightened around the frame. He said nothing. Do you recognize him? Sienna asked.
Et hésitated.
His throat felt dry. I'm not sure, he said, voice low. Maybe. She didn't push. She just nodded, eyes knowing. You've been through enough already. I won't ask more unless you're ready. Elijah nodded, grateful but torn. He knew who it was. He could give her the truth now. But what would happen then? Would she believe him? Would she want him and Maya around anymore, once the dust settled? People like Sienna lived in glass towers. People like Elijah didn't. Later that day, Maya wandered out into the garden terrace, barefoot and giggling. She ran among potted plants like it was a forest. Sienna sat beside Elijah on the bench, watching her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She reminds me of me, a long time ago, she said.
Before this.
Before the cameras, the boardrooms. I used to believe the world was made of stories and sunflowers. What changed? I did, she said simply. Elijah looked at her. Why are you helping us? She turned to him. Because someone should have helped me when I needed it. Because no child should be asked to carry what you carry. And because, she looked down at Noah sleeping in her arms, you didn't walk away. He swallowed hard. No one had ever said things like that to him. Not and meant them. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to stay. But part of him was still waiting for the floor to give out. That night, Elijah wandered into the kitchen for water.
The house was quiet.
Too quiet. A voice drifted from the hallway near the study. Male. Low.
Sharp. Elia?
That the kid's name. It was Thomas.
Elia froze behind the wall.
You should have let the street eat him alive, Thomas was saying. Now he's a liability. That kid saw me, I swear he did.
There was silence.
Don't worry, he said finally. I'll take care of it. I always do. Elijah backed away, heart pounding. He ran to Maya's room, shut the door, and leaned against it. The man who tried to kill a baby was here.
Under the same roof.
And now he knew Elijah had seen him. Elijah didn't sleep that night. Instead, he stayed up watching over Maya, mind racing. He couldn't run again. Not this time. But he couldn't stay silent, either. There was too much at stake. Not just for him. Not just for Maya. For Noah. For Sienna. For every kid who had ever been thrown away like garbage. In the dark, with only the soft sound of his sister breathing beside him, Elijah made a decision. Tomorrow, he would tell Sienna the truth. And no matter what happened next, he would not go quietly. The sun had barely risen when Elijah stepped out onto the marble floors of the Harper penthouse. The house was still asleep, blanketed in the quiet that only came before a storm. He stood at the window for a long moment, watching the glass reflect back a boy who barely recognized himself. He was wearing clean clothes. He had eaten 3 full meals the day before. He had slept, fitfully, but in a real bed. But none of it settled in. Not when he knew what he had to do. He couldn't stay silent.
Not when Thomas Harper sti walked disol.
Not when he was still looking for a way to cover what he'd done. Sienna was in the breakfast room, dressed in a simple grey sweater, Noah resting in a sling against her chest. She looked tired, but strong. She always looked strong. The kind of strong you had to grow into. Elijah, she said softly as he entered.
You're up early.
He sat down across from her, his hands tight around the edge of the table. I need to tell you something, he said. Her face changed, subtly. A shift from warmth to alertness. She listened. The man I saw at the hospital, Elijah said, voice quiet but steady. The one who dumped Noah in the alley. It was Thomas. There was a long silence. No gasps.
No accusation. Just stillness.
I wasn't sure at first, Elijah continued. But I saw him here. Heard him talking last night. He knows I saw him. He's scared I'll tell you.
Sienna closed her eyes.
It was as if she had known. Not the full truth, but something. Some part of her had been bracing for it. Thank you, she said finally.
Elia blinked. You believe me?
She nodded.
I veut non Thomas your life.
He doesn't think consequences apply to him. He's been unraveling since my father passed. Obsessed with taking control of the company.
En jaloux. Always jaloux.
She rose slowly, adjusting Noah gently. You didn't have to tell me. But you did. That means everything. I was scared, Elijah admitted. So am I, Sienna replied. But there was fire in her eyes now.
I'm done pretending.
By midday, the Harper residence was no longer quiet. Sienna had called an emergency board meeting at Harper International. It was unusual, some of the directors weren't even in the city, but she had insisted. She wore a blazer now, her expression unreadable. A different version of herself. Not the grieving mother. The CEO. Elijah stayed with Maya in the nursery, pacing, heart-pounding. He knew this wasn't just about the company. This was about power. About truth. And people with power rarely gave it up without a fight. Sienna returned in the afternoon, her face pale but composed. He denied everything, she said. Said you must have made it up. Said you're trying to extort us. I figured, Elijah said, jaw tight. But the board isn't blind. One of our security officers came forward, said Thomas had threatened him into deleting footage from the hospital. I've handed everything over to the police. Elijah let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding.
What happen now?
Now we wait, she said. And stay safe. The police arrived 2 hours later. Thomas Harper was arrested at his downtown condo, charged with attempted murder, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The media exploded. News vans parked outside the building. Helicopters hovered overhead. Old photos of Thomas and Sienna appeared on every screen, headlines screaming betrayal, scandal, and family war.
Elia a dit.
The way the world loved a headline but never cared about the people inside it. He stayed in the shadows, away from the windows, trying to make sense of what came next. Maya, on the other hand, danced through the apartment in socks, delighted by the sight of herself on TV, blurry in the background of a press photo, wrapped in Elijah's jacket. That's me, she squealed.
Il look fameux.
Elijah smiled for her sake, but inside, something unsettled remained. That night, Sienna sat with him on the balcony. Noah was asleep, the city below twinkling like a broken constellation. You've done more than most grown men would, she said. I didn't want to, Elijah replied. I just didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. The difference is, you chose the right thing when it mattered most. He looked out at the skyline. I don't know what happens now.
You savais du es.
But this isn't our life.
We don't belong in place like this.
Sienna turned to face him. Elijah, I didn't invite you here to borrow time. I meant it when I said you could stay. He shook his head.
I'm not your kid.
No, she said. But you could be.
If you wanted. The warden in the air.
Elijah had imagined hearing them before. From other mouths. Other homes. They'd always felt like stories, like the kind of thing that happened to someone else. He didn't answer. Not yet. But something in him opened. A crack of light in the wall he'd spent years building. Days passed. Maya started attending school through an online program arranged by Sienna's assistant. Elijah began helping out with Harper Foundation's youth initiatives, using his own experiences to help build better policies for unhoused teens. He was quiet, cautious, but something was changing. People listened when he spoke. Not because they pitied him, but because he made sense. But the more he gave, the more something inside him asked, who was he becoming? He stood between two worlds, the one he came from, and the one he might belong to. And he didn't know which to choose. One evening, Clara approached him with a letter. From the district attorney's office, she said. He opened it slowly. Thomas Harper had accepted a plea deal. 5 years in prison, plus mandatory psychiatric evaluation. No trial.
No courtroom. No confrontation. Elia felt nothing. And then, strangely, relief.
He had told the truth. The rest didn't matter. That night, before sleep, Maya curled beside him on the couch. Are we gonna live here forever? She asked. Elijah didn't answer right away. I don't know, he said. But for now, we're safe. She smiled, closed her eyes, and drifted off. And for the first time in years, so did he. Not in fear, but in peace. Elijah had never been inside a government building before.
Not like this.
Not clean and orderly, with fluorescent lights humming softly and people in suits walking around like they were born to own the world. The Department of Youth Services was nothing like the places that had once passed him over, looked at him like a case file, a burden too messy to handle. This time, they were looking at him differently. It had started with a phone call from Sienna's legal team. Then a meeting. Then another. Now, Elijah was sitting across from 3 program directors, a child psychologist, and a city liaison. He wasn't just there to tell his story, he was there to help design something new. I don't want another shelter, he told them. I don't want another cold building with locked doors and metal beds. I want a place that feels like someone is actually glad you walked in. The psychologist nodded, scribbling notes. One of the directors leaned forward. What would you call it?
Elia took for a moment.
First light, he said. Because for a lot of kids, it'll be the first time they've seen the world with hope. They didn't interrupt him. They listened. And that, more than anything, told Elijah he might finally be in the right room. Back at the Harper residence, Maya burst through the door after her online tutoring session. Guess what? She shouted. You finished your science project? Elijah asked, half distracted by a funding proposal draft on his laptop. Better, she said, pulling a folded piece of paper from her backpack. I got invited to speak at the school assembly. They want me to talk about my story. You know, from before. Elijah looked up, surprised.
You want to do that?
She nodded, more serious now. I think someone has to. Maybe some other kids sitting in that gym thinking they're all alone. Maybe they'll hear me and know they're not.
Elia smiled slowly. You sound like someone you know.
Must be a pretty cool someone, she said, then skipped off to the kitchen. He watched her go, pride welling in his chest. She wasn't just healing. She was rising. And maybe, so was he. The plans for First Light moved quickly. With Sienna's support, both financial and public, the city approved a pilot center in the downtown district, only 10 blocks from the neighborhood Elijah and Maya had once lived in. The building was an old community library slated for demolition. Elijah asked them to save it. We don't need new walls, he said. We need new reasons for people to walk through them. He spent his mornings at City Hall, his afternoons reviewing blueprints, and his nights meeting with formerly homeless teens who wanted to join the advisory council. At first, people doubted him. He was still just a kid. But he had something most of them didn't, lived experience and unfiltered honesty. And people listened. Sienna watched him from the sidelines, offering guidance when needed, but never leading for him.
You don't need me to speak for you anymore, she said one evening.
You're already louder than I ever was. 1 week before First Light's official launch, Elijah received a letter.
Andoritaine.
From someone he hadn't heard from in years.
The return address said Riverside Correctional Facility.
It was from his father. He sat with it for 2 hours before opening it. The letter was clumsy, with crossed-out words and smudges where tears had landed. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I've been sober 18 months. I heard what you did, for that baby, for Maya, for yourself. I'm proud of you. I didn't know how to be your father. But I pray you'll grow into the kind of man I couldn't be.
If you ever want to talk, you'll be here.
Elijah folded the letter and tucked it into his desk drawer. He didn't know what to feel. Maybe he wouldn't respond. Maybe he would. But the choice was his now. That mattered more than he could explain. Opening day came with rain. The sky was gray, the sidewalks slick with puddles, but the front steps of First Light were full. Reporters, city officials, former foster kids, activists,
Curieux passers-by.
and Elijah. He stood at the small podium in a plain black hoodie and jeans, a laminated name badge on his chest that read, Founder. He cleared his throat. I'm not here today because someone saved me, he began. I'm here because someone saw me. He scanned the crowd and spotted Maya, grinning and waving from the front row.
I've been invisible before.
Lived on sidewalks and in shadows. People looked through me. But one day, someone called my name. And that changed everything. This building isn't magic. It won't fix every problem. But it will give kids something I went too long without, a door that opens. A bed that's warm. A voice that says, I'm glad you're here. The crowd was silent. Then came the applause, slow at first, then rising like thunder. Elijah didn't smile until he saw the kids lining up behind the ribbon. They were from the neighborhood. Small, quiet, some with clothes too big or too thin. But they were there. And they were looking at him like he mattered. And he did. Inside, the space smelled of fresh paint and lavender. Soft lighting, bean bags instead of metal chairs, art supplies in open baskets. A kitchen with real food. Showers with dignity. Maya ran to one corner, already sketching with a group of girls. Sienna approached quietly, handing Elijah a small plaque. He read it aloud.
Tout Eliare Harper.
For choosing to light the way. His throat tightened. I didn't do this alone. No, she said. But you made it possible. Outside, the rain stopped.
A shaft of light broke through the clouds.
And Elijah, standing in the center of everything he once thought impossible, whispered to himself.
First Light.
Success has a way of drawing attention. At first, it came quietly, local media pieces, social workers bringing in referrals, donations trickling from families who had once turned their faces away. But as First Light grew, so did scrutiny. The problems began small. Fire code violations, despite having passed all previous inspections. A zoning dispute about how many youths could be housed overnight. Rumors in city council circles that First Light was creating dependency, rather than solving homelessness. Elijah met each obstacle with patience. He submitted paperwork, attended hearings, leaned on Sienna's lawyers when necessary. But it wasn't enough. One Thursday morning, just 3 months after the center opened, a cease and desist letter arrived. Issued by the city. The reason, alleged misuse of funds and unlicensed activity concerning mental health services. Elijah stood in the main office, the letter in his trembling hands. His heart thudded in his chest, but his face remained blank. Across the room, Clara read over his shoulder, her expression hardening. This is nonsense, she said. They're trying to bury you in red tape.
Elia exhaled slowly.
It's working. Outside, kids were painting a mural on the courtyard wall, a sunrise over cracked sidewalks. Inside, case files sat open, filled with names and ages and stories that mirrored his own. No one here was hurting anyone. But someone somewhere didn't like what was being built. And maybe it wasn't just someone. That night, Elijah met with Sienna in her study. They want you out, she said plainly. They won't say it directly, but you're not playing by the unwritten rules.
I'm not stealing. I'm not lying. What rule am I breaking?
The ones that say only certain people get to fix things, she replied. You're a kid with no degree, no title, no pedigree. And you're doing what entire departments have failed to do for decades. That makes you dangerous.
Elia sat down slowly.
I don't want power, he said. I just want those kids to have what Maya and I didn't. Then you'll have to fight for it, Sienna said.
The real way. No more hidden in the shadow. You go public. You go loud. Point.
He looked up at her, unsure. I don't know how to do that. You learn. Elijah took her advice. The next day, he called a press conference outside City Hall.
No suis, no téléprompté. Just a mic and the truth.
He stepped onto the concrete steps with Maya beside him and spoke into the cameras. I was 12 years old when I first slept on the street.
I knew how to hide. I knew how to keep my sister alive.
But I didn't know how to ask for help. When we finally did, the system told us we didn't count. Now that we've built something that works, the system wants to shut it down. I don't have a degree. I don't come from money. But I've lived the problem. I've survived the problem. And I'm not going to let anyone erase the kids who are still living it. The clip went viral overnight. By morning, support had surged. Activists flooded the city's inboxes. Local reporters questioned the legality of the shutdown. Even a state senator issued a statement in support of First Light's mission. But backlash came just as fast. Talk shows questioned Elijah's qualifications. Columnists accused Sienna of using him for publicity. Anonymous online trolls dug up photos from the tent days, throwing out words like delinquent, faker, and worse. Maya read one of the comments and cried. Elijah shut down the center's social media accounts for a week. He didn't sleep much after that. He walked the hallways of First Light like a ghost, checking in on the kids, watching the staff, memorizing the space in case it all vanished. He thought about the nights he'd spent under bridges, the days he'd carried Maya on his back looking for food, the weight of silence he'd grown up beneath. He thought about whether it had all been for nothing. Then one night, he heard a knock on the center's back door. It was a girl, maybe 13, with a duffel bag and shoes too big for her feet. Is this the place? She asked.
The one where they don't make you tell everything right away.
He nodded.
She exhaled.
Good. Because I don't even know how to start. He let her in. And remembered why he'd started. The legal team filed an injunction. Supporters organized a petition with over 100,000 signatures. A group of First Light Youth alumni, kids Elijah had helped, recorded testimonials and uploaded them to YouTube. Elijah gave a speech at a university campus, standing beside professors and policy experts who had once questioned him. I'm not here to dismantle the system, he said. I'm here to prove it can be better. The city council relented. The closure order was suspended pending further review. An independent audit cleared First Light of any wrongdoing. Funding resumed. But Elijah had changed. He no longer saw himself as a boy trying to stay invisible. He was visible now. And he wasn't going away. One evening, as the center returned to its rhythm, Maya found him sitting in the corner of the art room, watching a group of kids draw on a whiteboard. You okay? She asked. He nodded. I think so. She sat beside him. I saw you on TV, she said. You didn't even look nervous. I was. Terrified, actually. You didn't sound like it. He smiled. I guess that's what happens when you believe in what you're saying. They sat together for a while, listening to the buzz of voices, the scratch of markers, the hum of healing in motion. Then Maya spoke again. Do you think we'll always have to fight? Elijah considered the question. Probably, he said. But now we know how. That night, he wrote in his notebook, the same one he'd carried since the beginning. They tried to close our doors. But we are not the doors. We are the hands that built them.
And don't like this don't stop building.
He closed the journal. Tomorrow would come. And he'd be ready for it. Elijah stood in front of a map, an oversized printout tacked to the office wall at First Light. Red pins marked current youth shelters across the country. Blue pins showed where requests had come in to replicate First Light.
Places like Détroit, Tulsa, Memphis, Sacramento.
Places like where he had once been invisible. We could change everything, said a man beside him. His name was Cole Voss, a sharp-suited executive from Halberd Foundation, one of the wealthiest private donors to youth and education programs in North America. Elijah had met him only 2 days ago. Now, Cole stood in his office like he owned the air between them. We're prepared to fund 10 new First Light centers, Cole continued, with full staff, programming and community outreach.
You could be the face of something national.
Maybe even global. Elijah nodded slowly. It was the kind of opportunity no one in his shoes ever got. He looked back at the map. So many pins. So many kids. So much need. Then Cole handed him a folder. Elijah opened it. Inside were drafts of branding proposals. The Halberd Youth Initiative, powered by First Light.
Logo. Slogan.
Press quotes where Elijah's name was replaced by vague language like a survivor with a dream.
What is this?
Elijah asked. Cole smiled politely. A refinement. To make the message more accessible. A national audience responds better when it's less personalized.
You mean less messy.
Less specific, Cole corrected. This is how movements scale. You strip it down to the parts that sell. Elijah stared at him. And what about the kids? He asked. What about the names and stories that got us here?
You want to sell the house and erase the blueprint.
Cole remained calm. We're not erasing. We're reframing. You'll still be involved, just not front and center in every decision. Foundations like ours need consistency, polish. You've done the grassroots part. Now let the grown-ups take it from here. Elijah closed the folder.
10 conversations sauvères.
That night, he sat on the rooftop garden, watching Maya sketch under a heat lamp. She'd become the unofficial muralist for First Light, designing each new center's exterior art. Her latest project was a phoenix rising from a city street. Pretty sure they just offered me the world, Elijah said. And Maya didn't look up. They want to rename it. Rebrand it. Take it out of our hands. She paused, then glanced at him. Are we broke?
No.
But we can't open 10 more centers with what we've got. Not quickly, anyway. Maya nodded thoughtfully, then returned to her drawing. You remember the night you brought Noah back? She asked.
Yeah. Did you do it for the money?
No. Then why'd you do it? He looked out over the city, remembering that freezing alley, the trash bag, the impossible weight in his arms. Because someone had to.
Maya smiled softly.
Sounds like you already know the answer then. By the weekend, news of Halberd's offer had leaked. Media outlets speculated. Board members at First Light argued. Some believed Elijah was being stubborn. Others admired his integrity. Donors wanted clarity. The pressure mounted. Sienna invited him to dinner. I've been where you are, she said over pasta and wine. When Harper International went public, I had to decide whether to let investors dictate our vision or keep it boutique and risk losing reach. I chose scale. And I regret it sometimes. Elijah didn't answer. You're allowed to choose safety, she added. You're allowed to choose yourself. He set his fork down. But that's not why I built this. I know. She took his hand across the table. And whatever you choose, I'm behind you. But don't let fear make the decision.
Let purpose do that.
The next morning, Elijah called a full staff meeting at First Light. He stood in front of 20 team members, youth advisors, and mentors. Faces that had grown familiar. Some had been homeless once. Others had left stable jobs to be here. He told them everything. The offer. The money.
The condition.
Then he said, we started this because we knew what the world looked like from the sidewalk. Because we knew what it meant to sleep near a trash fire and hope no one noticed you. We didn't build First Light to become another system. We built it to be a space where names mattered. Where stories weren't scrubbed for press releases. I want to expand. I want to reach every kid we can. But not like this. Not by trading in the truth for a slogan.
Silence.
Then someone clapped. Then another. The room filled with it. He had chosen. And they had too. Cole Voss didn't respond to Elijah's rejection email. But someone leaked an internal memo from Halberd, labeling Elijah non-compliant and emotionally reactive. He didn't fight back. He didn't need to. Instead, he and his team launched a new initiative, First Light Collective, a decentralized expansion model allowing local leaders in each city to adapt the program with Elijah's guidance, without top-down branding or control. The first city to join? Detroit. The second?
El Paso.
Each center had a different mural.
À différents leads. À différents voices.
But each had one thing in common. A door that opened. And a name that mattered. Weeks later, Maya ran into the office holding a package. "Look," she said, dropping it on his desk. "It's from the girl who stayed here last month, the one from Bakersfield." Elijah opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in green ink.
Dear Elia.
"I used to think I was trash.
Like, actual trash.
Something someone could just throw out. But then I stayed at First Light, and someone remembered my name. It wasn't even a big thing. One of the volunteers just called me Zoe, instead of Kid. And I realized, maybe I'm not what they said I was. Thank you for making a place where people get to be real. Where we get to begin."
I think you saved my life. Love, Zoe.
Elijah held the letter in both hands. Then placed it gently on the shelf beside the photo of Maya, him, and Sienna on First Light's opening day. No plaque.
No brand deal.
Just proof that some things are worth saying no for. And that sometimes, the smallest names carry the loudest truths. It was a rainy Tuesday when Elijah saw him again. He just wrapped up a youth council meeting at First Light and stepped out into the alley behind the building to clear his head. The rain wasn't heavy, just enough to turn the air cool and slick. That's when he noticed the man sitting beneath the overhang, legs stretched, hands stuffed into a tattered coat. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't panhandling.
Just, there. Elia almost walked past.
Then the man looked up. And he froze.
Elia.
The voice hadn't changed. Just older, rougher.
C'était unmistakable.
It was his father. For a long time, neither of them spoke.
The man stood slowly, uncertain, almost ashamed.
He looked thinner than Elijah remembered, more fragile beneath the bulk of his coat. The years hadn't been kind. "I heard you were doing good," he said. "Didn't believe it at first. Thought it had to be another kid. But then I saw your face on TV." Elijah didn't respond. "I was in Riverside for 2 years. Got clean. Thought about writing you again. Then I figured, maybe I had no right." "You didn't," Elijah said, voice flat. His father nodded. "Fair." They stood in the rain like ghosts. One from a time that tried to break Elijah, the other from a time he'd tried to forget. "I'm not here to ask for anything," his father said. "I just wanted to see you. One time. That's all."
You saw me.
"Now what?" The words came out colder than Elijah intended, but he didn't pull them back. The man winced. "Guess I deserve that." He turned to leave. Then paused. "Your sister, she doing okay?" Elijah's fists clenched.
She's not your doctor anymore.
A beat passed. Then the man said, almost quietly, "She never stopped being mine." He stepped into the rain and walked away. That night, Elijah lay awake on the couch in the staff lounge, watching the ceiling and listening to the hum of the city outside. The conversation looped in his mind, unfinished, unwelcome, unresolved. He thought of the nights he had clutched Maya under a highway overpass while sirens screamed past. Thought of the hunger.
The silence.
The sheer terror of being 10 years old and completely alone. He had buried that part of himself beneath the work, the vision, the purpose. But now, it was knocking again. Not to haunt him. To ask something harder. Could he forgive? The next morning, Maya noticed the shadows under his eyes. "You look like you slept in a bad dream," she said.
Something like that.
He didn't tell her. Not yet.
Maybe not ever.
Part of him wanted to shield her from the memory. Another part knew that was impossible. "You okay?" she asked, pausing mid-toast. He nodded. "Just tired." But she saw through it. "Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone." He smiled, grateful. Then turned back to the weight he wasn't ready to name. Later that day, Elijah found himself at the outreach tent near Skid Row, First Light's mobile unit offering food, basic supplies, and connection. It was his first time back there in months. The tent hadn't changed much, but he had. He scanned the crowd instinctively, looking for a man in a torn coat.
Looking for a shadow.
Instead, he found Rosa. She was 15, short, and always angry. She'd been at First Light for a month last year before running away. Elijah had spent weeks worrying she might have vanished for good. Now she stood in line, holding a paper plate of food, eyes narrow as ever. "You came back," he said. She shrugged. "Got tired of sleeping on asphalt."
J'aurais dit tout comme homme.
She hesitated. "You still got that big purple beanbag?" He laughed.
Still there.
"Then maybe." It wasn't a yes. But it wasn't a no. And that was enough. That night, a letter arrived. This one wasn't from a stranger or a donor or the press. It was from his father.
Elia almost tossedit.
Instead, he opened it. "I meant what I said. I'm not here to take anything. I just needed you to know I was still out here. I know I wasn't a father. I know I left you in places no kid should ever have to survive. But I see what you've done. And even if you never speak to me again, I need you to know. You are everything I never became. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't stay. I'm sorry I didn't fight for you.
If someday you want to yell at me, I'll be around.
If you don't, I'll understand. Marcus or Dad, if that's ever okay again."
Elia read it twice.
Then a third time. And then sat there, holding it, as something warm and painful cracked open in his chest.
Not forgiven.
Not yet. But the beginning of space for it. A week passed. Then another. Elijah didn't reach out. But he didn't throw the letter away. He carried it in his backpack like a stone he needed to remember he could carry. Then one evening, he found himself back in that alley behind First Light. His father wasn't there. But Elijah stood in the same place, beneath the same overhang. He pulled out a pen and paper. And wrote a single sentence.
"I'm not ready.
But I don't hate you anymore." He didn't sign it. He left it taped to the wall with a rock. And walked away. That night, as he looked out across the city from the roof, Maya joined him. "You've been quiet lately," she said.
Just thinking.
"About the past?" He nodded. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You don't have to go back to it. But you don't have to run from it either." He put his arm around her. "I know." They stood together, watching the lights below flicker like distant stars. And for the first time, the weight of the past didn't feel like a chain. It felt like a road. And he was still walking. The invitation came in a navy blue envelope with the White House seal embossed in gold across the top.
Inside, a personal letter from the President's Office of Youth and Community Development.
They wanted Elijah to speak. Not at a rally. Not at a fundraiser. At the National Children's Equity Conference, an event televised across the country, broadcast to millions, with policymakers, educators, foundations, and government agencies in attendance. He would be the youngest keynote speaker in the event's history. "It's a huge honor," Clara said, sliding a printout of the agenda across his desk. "They want you to close the event."
15-minute spotlight.
Live audience, press coverage, interviews afterward. Every major outlet will be there. Elijah stared at the paper. His name was listed under national figures, senators, CEOs, and cabinet officials. "Why me?" he asked. Clara smiled gently. "Because you're doing what they're still trying to figure out. And because you're not just a success story.
You're a blueprint." Et exhaled slowly. What if he mess up?
Clara folded her arms. "Then you'll be human. And that's exactly what they need to see." In the days leading up to the trip to Washington, D.C., Elijah worked harder than ever. He revised his speech a dozen times. He sat with communication coaches, speechwriters, youth delegates. But no matter how polished the words became, something in him resisted. Every version of the speech felt a little too distant, too rehearsed, too much like a statue being carved from a boy who had once slept beneath newspapers. One evening, he sat alone in the First Light courtyard, flipping through a notebook of ideas, when Rosa sat down beside him. "You really gonna talk to the president?" she asked. "Guess so." She nodded, then added, "You scared?" He looked at her. "A little." "You should be," she said. "That's a big room." He laughed, but she didn't. Then she looked him in the eyes. "Don't forget us when you get on that stage." "I won't." "Say something real," she added. "Not for them. For us." He nodded. And finally, he knew what to write. Washington, D.C. was colder than he expected. On the day of the conference, the auditorium buzzed with energy. Screens flashed graphics. Banners flapped. Journalists wandered between panels, collecting sound bites. Elijah sat backstage, mic clipped to his collar, index cards in his hands. On the final card was a quote Maya had given him the night before. If you want the world to listen, speak like you're only talking to one person. The host introduced him. Applause. Lights. He walked onto the stage and stood at the podium, looking out at 1,000 faces. And he began. I didn't grow up in a room like this. I grew up in a tent.
On the edge of Skid Row.
I grew up eating whatever we could find and hoping no one took my sister.
Y grew up invisible.
And I'm not standing here because someone rescued me. I'm here because someone believed I had value before I looked like I belonged in a suit. He paused.
Let the word settle.
We talk about equity like it's a math problem. But it's not. It's a matter of belief. Do we believe that every kid deserves a clean pillow? Do we believe that hunger steals more than calories? It steals identity? First Light isn't special because we built beds or kitchens. It's special because we remembered names. Because we treated kids like they were already whole, even when the world told them they were broken. He looked out at the sea of faces. They were quiet now. Really listening. I've been offered millions to scale faster. To franchise First Light into something sleek and shiny. But I said no. Because if growing bigger means forgetting where you started, it's not growth.
It's erasure.
And I won't erase the kids who made this real. He finished quietly. If we want to fix the system, we have to start by seeing the ones it forgets. Not as statistics, but as stories. And stories deserve to be told.
Silence.
Then, applause, long, sustained, rising. He stepped back from the podium, heart hammering, not from nerves, but from relief. He had told the truth. That was enough. Backstage, reporters surged forward, flashes lighting the hallway. But Elijah brushed past them gently, straight to Maya, who had flown in with Sienna the night before. She hugged him tightly. You said something real, she whispered. He smiled.
Because of you.
Later that week, First Light was flooded with new emails. Requests from small towns and big cities. Requests for guidance, for mentorship, for copies of his speech. Teachers showed it to students. Foundations reached out, this time, without terms. And among it all, a simple email from a youth center in Omaha. We don't have much, but we've got 4 walls, a busted heater, and 3 kids who need hope. Can we call it First Light too? Elijah typed back. You already are. But not everyone was happy. At a board meeting the following week, some longtime donors expressed concern. You're becoming a symbol, one of them said. And symbols get politicized. Another added, you're veering into advocacy. That could hurt funding. Maybe pull back a bit. Elijah looked at them. I didn't build First Light to make everyone comfortable. They didn't reply. And he didn't apologize. That night, as he walked the halls of the original center, he passed the mural wall, painted by Maya, updated by every group of youth who passed through. It was full now.
Saint-Riz.
Names. Dates. Messages like, this place saw me. My first night safe. I remember who I am. He sat beneath it, knees to chest, letting the quiet settle around him. He didn't know what came next. But for once, that uncertainty felt like a gift. Like possibility.
Like sunrise.
He took out his notebook and wrote a single line. You don't need to be everywhere to matter. You just need to matter where you are. He closed the book. Tomorrow, the world would keep calling. But tonight, he was home. It was early spring when Elijah found himself standing on the same street where his story had once begun. The old alleyway off 7th and Alameda hadn't changed much. Same rusted dumpsters.
Sam faded graffiti.
Same low hum of the city behind it. But Elijah had. He stood there not as a runaway, not as a scared boy looking for warmth, but as someone who had built a place where warmth could be found. He was 20 now. The years had passed slowly and quickly all at once. First Light had grown, organically, deliberately. 7 locations across 5 states.
Olsztyn Community Drive-In.
All still rooted in the simple promise he had made, that no child should feel like their name didn't matter. But he hadn't come here to check on a building or oversee a launch.
Aider comme for something qui était.
To remember. That night, he stayed at the original First Light Center. The rooms had changed since its first opening. The walls had new paint, the furniture updated, the programs expanded. But the energy remained the same.
Et walked the hall if retracing steps in a dream.
In the library, a girl sat cross-legged on the carpet, reading aloud to a smaller boy who leaned on her shoulder. In the kitchen, 2 teens argued playfully over whose turn it was to wash dishes.
From the room came music, soft, imperfect, human.
He smiled. These were the sounds of a place that worked. Not perfectly, but enough. Later that evening, he sat on the back steps with Maya. Now 16, she was taller, louder, and sharper in every possible way. She wore her hair in tight curls, dyed the color of marigolds, and had taken to introducing herself as a walking sunrise. Elijah didn't argue. She had earned that title. "Remember when we used to sleep under the stairs?" she asked, biting into a peanut butter sandwich. "I remember the rats under the stairs," he said. She laughed. "Sometimes I wonder if all this is real," she admitted. "Like we made it up. Like we're still under that top dreaming." "I used to think that too." "What changed?" He paused, considering. "I started waking up without being afraid." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's how I knew too."
They sat together in the fading dusk, watching the city breathe.
A few weeks later, Elijah received an invitation to a gala in New York, one of those black tie events with chandeliers and champagne and donation paddles. He'd become used to them. Mostly, he went because they paid for more sleeping bags and therapists. But this one was different. It was hosted by the Global Human Rights Council. They wanted to honor Elijah with a Lifetime Contribution Award. At 20, he almost laughed when he read it. He showed the letter to Sienna. "You haven't even lived half a life," she said with a smirk. "I know.
That is what is weighed."
She sobered. "But you've lived the part most people never survive." He nodded. Still, something in him hesitated. The more recognition he received, the more he felt the risk of becoming a symbol instead of a person. "Go," Sienna urged.
"C'est something real, and then come home."
At the gala, beneath glittering lights and crystal chandeliers, Elijah wore the same black jacket he'd worn in D.C. He stepped onto the stage and looked out over the rows of gowns and tuxedos. He didn't pull out a speech. He just spoke. "I don't believe in being the face of anything. Because movements aren't made of faces. They're made of people. People who show up. People who listen. People who remember that it's not about saving anyone, it's about not looking away. I was a kid with no one. Then someone saw me. That's all it took. And when I had the chance, I decided to keep seeing others. That's what First Light is. A place that refuses to look away." He paused, then smiled. "And if I'm being honest,
I don't want a Lifetime Award.
I'm still in it. Still choosing to show up. So maybe, just call it an in-the-middle award."
The room logged.
Then stood. He left without staying for the after-party. Back in Los Angeles, Elijah visited his father one last time. Marcus now lived in a small shared housing unit on the outskirts of the city.
Stay clean.
Stay quiet. Still trying. They walked slowly around the courtyard together. No speeches.
No big reconciliation.
Just 2 men who shared blood and history, choosing to be present. "I watched your speech," Marcus said. "Which one?" "The one with the in-the-middle part." Elijah smiled. "You think you're still in the middle?" his father asked. "I hope so," Elijah replied. "It means I've got more to do." 1 month later, Maya graduated high school. Top 10 in her class. She gave a speech. Talked about the difference between surviving and living. Said she'd learned that from her brother.
Elle a crié.
Quietly. Proudly. Later, she announced she'd be taking a gap year, not to travel, but to launch an art therapy program at First Light. "Someone's got to turn these murals into movements," she told him. He didn't argue. The day First Light's 10th center opened, they held a small ceremony. Not with media. Not with donors. Just with kids. Each wrote their name on a wall that would never be painted over. Then, they planted a tree in the courtyard. Elijah placed the first shovel of dirt. A volunteer asked him what kind it was. Fig, he said. They take time. But they last. That night, he sat on the roof, notebook in hand.
Sam ol liter cover.
Worn edges. Inside were years of thoughts. He flipped to a blank page. And wrote. I thought I was building shelter. But I was building home. Not just for others. For myself.
Not all stories end.
Some become places. He closed the book. Below, the lights of First Light glowed against the dark. And in his chest, something quiet and sure settled.
Not en ending.
But a belonging. He was still walking the road. But now, he knew its name.